Hi folks, so we're going to be talking about the demographic transition model today. So as the name suggests, this is how countries transition through their population, how the demographics of that population changes through times as they develop economically, as they develop with their food systems, with their health systems, etc. So we're going to actually graph this. So you can draw this out. So on our axis here, we're going to have population size or number of people. And then on the bottom here, we're going to have stages of the demographic transition model, stages of DTM. As always, let me know if there's anything that you can't read. I know sometimes I have messy handwriting, but I'll try to say what I'm writing at the same time. So hopefully you can get it one way or another. And we're going to plot out a few different things here. So first, let's split it into the 5 stages. So you can give yourself 5 little tick marks. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th stage. Okay, so the first stage is countries that are still developing, countries that are still growing. So we're going to have, actually, we'll add this to a little legend here. A straight line is going to equal birth rate, number of babies born, and the dashed line is going to equal death rate. So we'll see how these change in relation to each other as countries develop. So we're starting off in developing countries. We have really, really high birth rates and also really, really high death rates, right? So some factors of stage 1. These are all the different stages again. Some characteristics. We have, again, really high birth and death rates, really high CBR and CDR, crude birth rate and crude death rate. Increased births due to several different factors. There's little access to family planning or contraceptives. So you don't really have a choice in whether or not you'd like to have babies. It's a good labor source. If you're trying to, say, grow crops in a field, you might need extra hands to help. Might help look after family members, look after family. Yeah, maybe there's high birth rates. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes at the same time. High birth rates, so then you would, high child mortality, rather. So high levels of child mortality would give you an incentive to replace those children. And we also have high death rates due to poor sanitation, access to food might be limited, access to health services might be limited. There might be really extensive poverty. Etc. And then as far as examples, there's not really any current examples. No current examples. Most countries have moved out of this stage as the entire world has sort of developed. Okay, cool. Just making sure it all fits on the screen. Great. So stage 2. So as countries start to develop, generally they maintain that really high birth rate because they would still have an incentive to have more kids, right? They would have more help on the farm, people to look after their family. But as food access increases, as health services increase, death rates will actually start to drop. So death rates are going to start going down. And this brings us to stage 2. So we still have a high birth rate, but we have a lower death rate, lower CBR in stage 2. So this leads to rapid population growth. Rapid population growth. As you might expect, we're still having lots of babies, but fewer people are dying. So this is, again, due to better education, increased access to food, increased access to health, health services, etc. And some examples of this could be like Afghanistan, Sudan, other places too. And these will have the really traditional triangle style pyramid, right? We have a really high birth rate, maybe a slightly lower death rate. If we're seeing really high birth and death rates, you're actually going to get sort of a even more dramatic triangle where it's really narrow at the top and then wider at the bottom. So this narrow triangle would be for stage 1, and then you kind of get a more traditional triangle in stage 2 as we improve our resources and health. Okay, and then as the country continues to develop, we are still lowering our death rate, which is great. And then people also start to lower their birth rate as well. So in stage 3, we're seeing a drop in both CDR and CBR. A drop in both birth rates and death rates. So this would lead to a slower rate of growth, as you might expect. We're having fewer babies. And although fewer people are dying, since that birth rate is going down, the overall growth rate is also slowing. So this is sort of happening in places like Brazil, Argentina, etc. And you might have sort of an intermediary shape here, right? So kind of going from a triangle, maybe it's still a little bit like a triangle, but maybe more of a trapezoid. So this is stage 3. Then we get to stage 4, and by this point, birth rates and death rates are both relatively low compared to a lot of the place. So again, low birth rates, low CBR, and low CDR, low death rates too. These are the more economically developed countries, right? So as our economies have grown and developed, we can kind of support more people. We have better access to contraceptives, to family planning, so that birth rate has come down. We also have really good access to healthcare, things like that. So women have more access to the economy, jobs, and then they're sort of more empowered, so they can kind of have a bigger role in how many babies they actually produce, right? We also have good medical services here, which has really helped bring that death rate down. Great, and then, yeah, usually plenty of food, generally, though some MEDCs might still have people that go hungry, like in Yavapai County, 1 in 3 children are still hungry, which is insane in one of the richest countries in the world. So the shape of these population pyramids is going to be actually more of like almost a block. And then you'll get kind of that curve at the end, because, you know, it's still pretty rare for people to live to be 80, 90, 100 years plus, but we get kind of more of a consistent percentage of population within each age group. So these are places sort of like the USA, right? United States, maybe to a certain extent, the United Kingdom is in here. Canada might also be like this. It's kind of funny, it looks almost like a tombstone, but actually this is pretty good for growth. Your population is stable, probably will not grow or shrink over time. But that brings us to stage 5. So in stage 5, we still have really low birth rates, maybe even lower birth rates than in stage 4. But then the death rates are higher. Whoops, CDR is going to be greater than CBR. So we're actually going to have a slightly higher death rate than we are a birth rate. So you might think, what's going to happen there? Well, you're going to actually end up with a population that's not really replacing itself. So this is going to shrink the population size. Will start to go down. We have people that are dying, but we don't have enough births to replace those people. So this is what's happening in Japan. This is what's happening in Sweden. We saw this in Spain. You see something like this in South Korea. These are all having that sort of inverted pyramid shape, right? So where it's actually, oh geez, that's kind of messy. Sorry about that. We'll start from the bottom here. So we have fewer children and then more old people, right? So you kind of get that almost inverted triangle shape. And this might happen for a variety of reasons. Kids are expensive in these countries. So maybe there's an incentive to have fewer children. There's an increased elder care. So we do really well at taking care of old folks. So they tend to live longer. Maybe there's less family-oriented folks. Maybe people are more interested in their career, that type of thing. That's everyone's choice. But you just might have a higher rate of that here. Decreased infant mortality, etc. Infant mortality. Great, yeah, so Japan and Sweden are seeing this, where your population is going to get older and older, and then you're going to have a smaller population of working folks to actually support that really old retired population. So for your specific country, you should try to consider which stage it is in. Probably not going to be stage 1, but is it more of a developing country with that kind of traditional pyramid, and maybe they're trying to lower their birth rates? Is it sort of one of these intermediary positions where maybe they're just kind of trying to keep things as they are? Or are they in this stage 5 where it's an inverted pyramid and they're actually trying to increase their birth rates to try to replace that population? So let's do one more thing. I'm going to get one more marker here. We're going to use the brown marker, and this is going to be total population size. So we're going to starting with a relatively arbitrary value here. Your population size could start with 1,000 people, or it could start with 1 million people. But in general, the population will change in the same way, no matter how many you start with. So as you might expect, in the first stage, we might just be rather consistent with our population. And then as death rate starts to drop, but we maintain that high birth rate, the size of the population is actually going to skyrocket. And then moving on to stage 3 here, we've lowered our birth rate as well. So we're still going to increase, but we're going to increase at a slightly more consistent rate. And then moving on to stage 4, we've gotten to relatively low birth rates, relatively low death rates. And so that allows our population to stay rather consistent. So we have a stable population here, as you can see from that really sort of stable shape of the pyramid, quote pyramid, because that's obviously not a pyramid. And then as birth rates dip below death rates, that's when you have the problem of the population actually decreasing. So in stage 5 here is when you actually start to see a dip in population as well. So these countries, Japan and Sweden, some of them have calculated that if they don't do anything to change this trend, they actually could have no more people in their country in just a few hundred years, which is really crazy to think about. But if trends stay as they are, if you don't count immigration and emigration, it's a likely possibility. That's why a lot of these countries have policies to try to encourage births, encourage women to have more children, so they can try to curb this dip in population. I mean, ideally, you want your population to be sort of stable, right? Keep the same number of people, replace those people as they die. And then ideally, you can support everyone in a nice, happy, and healthy state. So let's just add one more thing. As we can see in this graph, population is increasing in stages 2 and 3, especially in stage 2, but also in stage 3. And then the population is decreasing in stage 5. And then sort of staying the same in about stage 4.